You are tuned to another episode of Meet the Author. I'm David Charles and I'm with my co-producer Helen King.
Hello.
Welcome to you specifically and to all our other listeners, whether you're travelling, working or simply just relaxing. Meet the Author is where we do just that, talking with an author about their book in progress, their newly published book, their book in wide circulation already, which may have been and still is a bestseller. In this episode, we're meeting a published author of a very special, experiential travel novel. As is usual with the guests we meet, their book is not the only point of interest, as we will all shortly discover. The book we are discussing is the significantly titled Ride Like A Gaucho, and it's our great pleasure to welcome to our special guest, the book's author, Sophia Ashe.
Thank you very much. Hello.
Welcome to our podcast, Sophia.
Welcome, Sophia.
Thank you.
Well, as we said in the intro, there's a whole lot more to you as an author than meets the eye, unless you get to know this person in some detail. So that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. A bit about you, how you came to be where you are in life, and of course, importantly, how you came to write this book.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
where should we start, Helen?
Twists and turns.
Well, if we could go back a bit, so you said in your book that you really enjoyed being at school and being at university.
Mm-hmm.
The second bit I can understand. The first bit is complete mystery to me. You enjoy school.
I always had quite a good time at school, good friends. I enjoyed it as a whole. But my sort of secondary and final stage of school was just fantastic, and I was actually there a few months ago at the speech day to see a student through, and I said to one of the teachers, there are two things that I would do again, and that would be 3 months on the ranch in Argentina or 5 years at Westernbird. And she said, no, you don't mean that. And I said, I really do, and you know me well enough to know that would be true.
Right.
So I had a great time at school, really good relationship with everybody there, and yeah, I know it's odd for some people to hear that, and it
it's also encouraging.
It makes me sad when people say that they couldn't wait to get out of school, that they hated it, because I think, gosh, if you'd experienced what I did, then
Right.
that
Well,
would have been great.
That's really
That's
interesting. I mean,
great.
we've got our own thoughts on education and if you like, the standard of education. And okay, you were at a very distinctive school at Westernbird, of course,
Yes.
which is not kind of so much like the run-of-the-mill of state schools. And there's a lot to be said for all of that. But it's delightful to hear that you enjoyed your time there. And perhaps another time we can explore the reasons, the specific reasons for that. And because we'd like to examine, again, going back to the subject of education, the differences between state school and a school like Westernbird.
Mm-hmm.
But Sophia, were you a keen writer when you were at Westernbird?
I wouldn't say so. No, I wasn't even a keen reader, if I'm honest. I've never been good at reading. Just come on holidays, we get through a book. It's like, no, I'd rather do something else. I was never really fussed. One book caught my attention, and that's when I thought, okay, well, books are not so bad. But I did do AS English, so I had to read and write quite a bit for that. But I don't have an artistic brain, so when I thought it would be nice to write a book at some stage of my life, but I can't make up names and situations and things. So I thought, well, there's nothing really that I could write about, because I don't have a story that I could come up with. So yes, when I had this experience, I thought this might actually be something worth writing about, and that's how that came along, really. Yes.
Well, before that came along, you left school, of course, Westernbird, and you went to
the Royal Ag in Siren, of course.
Right, now, thank you.
Yes.
Now, you emanate. Your father, for example, he's a professional medic, isn't he? He's a
Yes.
doctor.
Yeah.
of medicine. And what is not untypical for daughters and sons of fathers that are like yours is to go into the medical profession. But you chose not to do that. You pursued agriculture instead. Why did that happen?
Well, originally I actually wanted to be a vet, which may not surprise you.
Right.
I love animals, and I always knew that I wanted to work with animals, and I wanted to be a vet, and then over time I started saying, actually I'm not sure that would be for me, because I'm sure vets see a lot of good things too, but generally you get called out to sort out something bad.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't think I can do that. I don't want to be the one to put down someone's dog or anything else. So I hit a real wall at school. It was at the time when you were thinking about A-levels, GCSEs, and I thought, I've got no idea what I want to do. At the same time, the school was saying, go and do work experience, or otherwise you'll have, well, the universities probably won't look at your personal statement if you've got no experience. And I thought, okay, well, what can I do that might be vaguely interesting? Somebody gave me the details for David Wilson, who used to be the manager at the Duchy Home Farm just down the road. So get in touch with him and see if he'll give you some work experience. And he very kindly did. And I did just the week over a summer. And after the first day I came off the farm saying, I'm going to do this. I just loved it. And the team were great, and when I see David now, I still remind myself, I'm in this thanks to you. and it seems to put a smile on his face, because not farming background or anything at all. The last farmers in my family were my great-great-uncle, grandfather, I don't even know, but a long time ago. So it did come out of the blue, and I don't know what I would be doing if I weren't doing agriculture.
Okay.
That's fantastic, isn't it? You're really in the right vocation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. It's interesting what you said actually about you did consider being a vet, but then you realised that it's not a particularly happy job, because why would it be?
Yeah.
Why would it be? Yes.
I get to do and see a lot of what a vet does anyway. I've had a few stitches this season in animals and things like that, and I get to see that part, and I've also got to see them all recover, and that's what I like. You think that was worth it, and you get to do your own treatments of the animals as well. So
right.
I feel like I've got the best of both worlds, really.
But okay, we talked about animals here, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the Duchy farms were local to here at least, were all arable and no livestock. Is that right?
No. So as an organic farm, the organic farms do use a lot of livestock in rotations, and they did have, they had dairy, a little bit of beef, they had some pigs, sheep, and all the arable as well. So they had a bit of everything, which is why it was a really nice experience.
Right.
To go into the deep end of just about everything.
So that was the trigger then. Bang! You landed on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Yes,
finally.
literally.
Oh, farming.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yes.
your father was probably a bit stunned, wasn't he?
I don't really know, to be honest. My parents are thrilled that I love what I do so much, and that's all they could really hope for. But I don't really know what they thought about it, really.
Okay. Well, you'll have to ask them at some point.
Yeah, just interesting. They were just quite happy that I found something that I was going to follow, because they were quite sad and also obviously a bit concerned when I said, I don't know what I want to do. I've got no clue.
Right.
So your father didn't suggest that you might like to be a doctor, because there wasn't a reason to say that, presumably?
No, I'm sure he would have been very happy if I had, but at the end of the day, it's animals over people.
Totally understand.
Yeah.
What about your mother? Does she have a career?
My mother's worked in PR for really big companies before, so again something completely different, but a massive animal lover all her life as well. So that runs in the veins.
Okay.
Yeah, the animals and countryside and all that. That's strong in us all.
I can tell. Okay, so with university over and a degree put in the bank, you now turn to agriculture proper, obviously. So tell us about the agriculture that you're involved with now, Sophia.
Well, I I'm very much livestock focused. I do a bit of everything though. But one of the main interests I had was like the climatic impacts that agriculture has, and global agriculture, and how things are done differently around the world. So I didn't take a gap year after school, so I decided to do a sort of gap year after uni, which is why I decided to go travelling. I did almost 5 months in Australia and then the 3 months in Argentina. And I just thought it was really important to see how other people do it, what's good about what they do, what's bad, and what we can learn from one another. And I think when it comes to addressing the entire global impact of agriculture, you can't just look at a per country basis. Obviously per country is good, and each country needs to focus on themselves to have an impact, but at the end of the day we're all on the same planet, so you can't just say we're doing our best but somebody else 5,000 miles away is scoffing it up for the rest of us.
Yes.
And that was the main reason to go, really, and it was an eye-opener, especially Australia, I must say.
Right.
Yeah.
We can tell. Speaking of Australia for a moment, Helen was really puzzled by the fact that there wasn't one mention in the book that she found, at least, of spiders out there.
Well, I thought it was bad enough to mention the snakes. I said there are three reasons. Perhaps Sophia's not bothered by spiders, unlike herself. Perhaps there aren't any spiders, despite we've heard. Or possibly the Australian Tourism Marketing Board said don't mention spiders, please.
No, I had plenty of spider encounters. The cattle station, the house was riddled with redbacks.
They're quite nasty, aren't they?
They are, yeah, apparently.
Are they even really small spiders?
They're actually fairly big. In a way, they're somewhat pretty. I know that sounds really odd because they do have quite dramatic red markings on them, but they were all over the house, and they said if that bites a child, that could be lethal, but if that bites you, it will feel like you've been hit by a sledgehammer under the armpit because it affects the lymph glands.
Really?
So lots of redbacks. And then on one of the farms I had my hand on a piece of wood and a spider ran over my fingers that I didn't recognise. I was very cautious of everything I saw out there, of course, but I didn't recognise it, and luckily it just trotted on. A few months ago I saw an article online that was in fact called a white-tailed spider, and it could have caused necrosis of my entire arm if it had bitten me. So that makes you think a bit when you come that close. And actually down in Victoria on the ostrich farm, I shared a house with a huntsman spider. He was only little, and the girl who was already working there had called him Sparkle to make it sound a bit nicer, and she said, just by the way, there's a huntsman called Sparkle, he lives in the bathroom. And I said, okay. He wasn't the biggest of huntsmans, and he did indeed live in the bathroom. And there were twice that I'd go in the bathroom and he wasn't there. And then that's when you worry. So I went back to my room, and one time I found him in my room, and I said, sorry mate, you're not staying here. So put him in a box and returned him to the bathroom. And then the other time was in the morning. I said, well, where is he? And he, just as I walked into the kitchen, he dropped from the ceiling on a web and nearly landed on my head. And I said, you're getting a bit too close for comfort, like go back to your place. I'm not going to hurt you, you're not hurting me, but that does give you fright of your life when you're barely awake in the morning and that sort of falls in front of you.
Gracious,
absolutely. That's absolute nightmare scenario. No,
they were all right.
But it sounds like what you say, he really did live in my house. Yes, he really did live in my house. He was there all the time.
They did sit on the cattle station, and I was driving a bulldozer a bit, and they said just check the ear defenders, because there's a huntsman the size of your hand that likes to sleep inside the ear bit. I looked everywhere for it and I couldn't find it, so I was actually quite upset about that. But then I went to share a house with one, so I got my own back, I guess.
So spiders don't feature in this book for, I think, probably obvious reasons now.
Oh yeah, the snakes are enough to talk about, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, each their own.
Yeah, indeed.
But I don't think you talked about spiders in your recent presentations on rare breeds. I think you talked about more cuddly animals, didn't
Nicer
you?
creatures, yes.
Nicer creatures, as in Ones that don't bite and sting, or ones that look nice, or both?
Still got some biters, but yeah,
Well, this-
no stings.
The subject of rare breeds, of course, is another one of those added dimensions for you, Sophie. I mean, this is a big topic for you, isn't it? And one,
Yeah.
as Helen says, that you give presentations about. So tell us a little bit about your interest in rare breeds.
Well, the Duchy Home Farm had a large selection of rare breeds, and that's where I was first introduced to them. It was Gloucester cattle, British white cattle, the Irish moiled, and the Ayrshires, which are dairy and beef breeds as well, very rare, especially the Irish moiled. And then Hebridean sheep, Shropshire sheep, and Tamworth pigs, and I think there are a couple of other things as well. So, yes, and I was going around the farms asking about all these animals, and they said things like the Irish moiled, there are only about 100 breeding cows in the country, and used to have large black pigs, there are only about 40 sows in the country at one point. And I thought, oh, that's really sad. And obviously my love for animals, I thought that's sad if we saw them go. And from then on, I just had this interest in keeping them alive, and they're so beautiful, they're so different to what you see commercially. So I've had I've got some sheep of my own, and I did at one point have Jacob sheep, and I still keep Wiltshire horns, both of which have moved up on the watch list, so they're not actually classified as rare, but they're native and minority. And the farm I work on has got a flock of rare breed sheep as well, so we have Cotswolds and Norfolk horns. And actually this summer we've been showing them at a few shows, predominantly the Cotswolds. We were at the Moreton and Marsh show on Saturday and took the Norfolk horns for the first time. But yes, this summer
Did they enjoy that, by the way?
Well, some do. It's amazing that there are some. The rams seem to really settle down, and they like the attention, and they like looking good. The ewes are a nightmare. They make such a noise and such a fuss. But so 4 shows, 19 sheep, and 14 rosettes, which we're really proud of.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's great.
and it's been a super experience, and it's really nice going to the shows. And mainly it was a Cotswold sheep class, and then there were other classes, but it's so nice to see the variety of rare breeds that go to these shows, and they're the ones that are nice to see, the things that people don't generally see in the field.
Yes.
The tiny little goat-like things with 4 horns instead of 2, and they're beautiful. I really enjoy working with them. They're very different to commercial breeds, but I think that's what makes them special and beautiful.
Definitely it is, yes.
Well, perhaps we can get you, Sophia, to write something for Connect about rare breeds, to offload some of your interest and insights into their beauty and into their value to the world as a whole. That would be delightful.
I love that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, before we get into the main subject of the book, can you give us a brief outline of what Wagyu beef is all about?
Oh, Wagyu beef. So it's a Japanese breed of cow. People think Wagyu is a type of beef. Well, Wagyu is the breed, and it literally translates from the Japanese as Japanese cow. And it's famous because of the very high marble content of the meat. So even if you might not be familiar with Wagyu, you might recognise Kobe as the name, or just a photo of a very pale pink meat with this high quantity of fat in it.
So when you refer to the marbling effect, we're talking about little deposits of fat within the tissue, if you like.
Yeah, so intramuscular fat that shows itself like veins running through the meat.
I see, right.
And a lot of breeds would have them. Like Aberdeen Angus has got really nice marbling, but Wagyu is famous for this very, very, very high percentage of. It's practically white, and it puts a lot of people off, but because of this whole fat is bad, which is another topic in itself and not true whatsoever, but it's world renowned for being the most tender, most juicy, most flavoursome meat in the world.
Oh wow.
Right. And why is there so much fat in the meat?
Well, because traditionally the Wagyu was what they called a dual-purpose breed. It was a draft animal first. It was used on farms to pull equipment before machinery. And so the breed just developed this, well, it's all an energy stash in the meat to be able to pull.
Yeah.
And if you read into the history, there's all sorts of stories, but it comes down to eventually someone decided to eat one of the old cows. Some emperor requested beef, and so they said, well, kill an old cow. And it came out this, very marbled, very tender, juicy, fantastic meat. And they said, oh, we've got something special here. And actually the Japanese knew that very, very well and didn't allow the export of any Wagyu animals out of their country. And they said, this is what we've got and this is for us.
Right.
But in the 1970s, some animals were smuggled out of the country, and that's how we got it in the rest of the world.
Right. So have we got it here in the UK?
And we do, and there are some breeders that are actually investing quite a lot in the genetics to be able to get that very good quality beef. And my interest with the breed sparked when I worked on a Wagyu beef farm just down the road from Tetbury. And they're developing their genetics and all that. But I just found it really fascinating, completely different to these other conventional breeds.
How about that? How about
potency of marbling and deliciousness.
Well, I think given the fact as well that we've got a herd just outside Tetbury now, I think the people of Tetbury and far beyond need to know about that. So maybe we'll talk another again about an article on that subject. Right. Shall we turn our attention now to your book, Sophia?
Mm-hmm.
To Ride Like a Gaucho.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the first question to ask is, why Argentina?
Well, so I say, I wanted to go and experience agriculture in other places, and one of the things I've always wanted to do is horseback cattle ranching. And at one point I didn't mind whether that was going to be in Australia, the States, or actually it was my mother who suggested Argentina. So I'm half Spanish, my mother being the Spanish one,
right.
And she has Argentinian friends, and she said, look, you've been to the States, why don't you try and go somewhere else? And Argentina's a beautiful country. And I was like, yeah, okay, well, maybe, okay. I didn't really think much of it at the time. And she got in touch with her friends, and her friend said, my best friend has got these ranches. I think she can get in touch with him and sort it out. And that's what happened, really. And I thought, well, the good thing is the language barrier is not there. So sure, why not? Go and do something Latino, move away from all the English side and try something completely different.
And it certainly was, wasn't it? I mean, by this time,
Yes.
You've been to Australia, I think, and
Mm-hmm, yeah.
from what you were saying a moment ago, you've been to America. So you were
Yeah.
kind of, you were getting to the point of being well-travelled around the globe now. So
Yeah.
Argentina was not such a big step as it might be for some others.
Hmm.
But what happened? You arrived there with a suitcase, not knowing a thing about
Yeah.
anything. What happened?
Yeah, well, Australia was different. I've got lots of friends and family out there. So I had them as a fallback if I had troubles with jobs or just life in general. But Argentina was completely different. I knew nobody in the country whatsoever. I had no friends, no family. All I had was this reassurance from this good friend of my mother's that his friends are good people and that they would look after me. That was all I had. I'd never met them beforehand, of course. I'd spoken to them on the phone, and that was it. I arrived in Buenos Aires. I stayed at their flat in the city for a few days, and then I was told that there's a really lovely ranch about 800 kilometers away from Buenos Aires, in the middle of nowhere in La Pampa, about 150 kilometers away from the nearest town. And I had their word, and nothing but their word, that you'll have a great time and everybody out there will look after you. And I thought, well, you know what?
So far, so good.
We'll go for it.
What's the worst going to happen? In a strange country, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know about 2 people, and how bad can it be?
Exactly. And
Yes.
so I thought, you know what? Just
Go with it.
go for it.
Well, you'd already had an
Definitely.
experience with snakes and spiders, so I mean,
And
it couldn't
ostriches.
possibly be worse.
no.
Was
No.
my thinking anyway.
Well, the thing is, after your ostrich experience in Australia, because I know
Mm.
we're not your favourite animal, you probably think, well, it can only get better, really, can't
Yeah,
it?
and there
Yes.
I was thinking, as
Yeah.
long as there are no ostriches,
Because-
and then it turns out that there were.
Ah,
There were little rhea. Little
Right.
rheas are like smaller ostriches, and they lived wild. So luckily, they didn't give me any grief. But yeah, it was quite something going out to the middle of nowhere and knowing that it would be this team of completely unknown people, also all men out there as well, and just being told, don't worry, they're good chaps, they'll look after you.
right, good.
That's incredibly
You think-
courageous. Most people, and when you were only 21, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Yes. I mean, I can't overstate how courageous that is.
Well, I thought it would just be an adventure.
Well, it
And-
certainly was.
Yeah. It was, but-
exactly,
That's
exactly. But of
exactly-
course, it's that's some people's perspective. It's not as if
Mm.
it was completely unknown to you in many ways. But having said that, the place was unknown. Where was the place? Patagonia.
It's yes. So La Pampa is the province, and it is Patagonia is a bit like the Cotswolds. It's this
Yes, a
region,
region, yeah.
not a province.
Yes.
And in theory, La Pampa is like the geographical start of Patagonia, although it's very different to what you might think of Patagonia when you think of these mountains and these incredible lakes. La Pampa was, Pampa comes from the old Indian word for plains. So it's flat but undulated
Right.
and sand. It's pure white sand, like a beach.
Right.
And so no mountains, no rocks, small trees that are all just like prickly acacia trees. So not tall things, they're more like giant shrubs. And yes, so that was about, as I say, 150 kilometres from the nearest town.
And I think you said 800 kilometres from Buenos Aires?
Something like that, yes.
So, I
right
take it
in the
you
centre
didn't
of the
get there
country.
by train service. This was a drive, was it?
It was a drive, it was a 9-hour drive.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. So
Long way.
then you, of course, let's back up a little bit. One of the things that wouldn't have faced you by doing this, which sounds quite extraordinary to a lot of people, I think,
Mhm.
particularly at an age of 21, as Helen suggested,
Mhm.
but because your mother is Spanish,
Yeah.
my guess is you are fluent in Spanish.
Yes.
Right. So, and you're going to be speaking Spanish with these men down in
Yes.
La Pampa, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So that's not to be phased, is it, with the awkwardness of language, etc. Although there might be
it
some
was quite
differences.
funny though, because I had given all the information about myself to the owners of the ranch. I said, I've been riding for this amount of years, I am in farming, you know, I drive tractors, I work livestock, and I was communicating all of this in Spanish. And when I got to, essentially when I got to Argentina, everyone I met went, oh my gosh, your Spanish is so good. Oh, that's a relief. And I thought, did you not receive any information about me beforehand? And they were just saying,
No.
are you happy on the horses? Like, what sort of riding? And you don't have to do any work you don't want to. And I thought, this has not been very well communicated here. So it was this massive sigh of relief from everybody I met, because I think they were just told, there's an English girl who wants to come for some experience, and so particularly the gauchos who speak no word of English were saying, oh my god, how are we going to do this? And when I wandered over and said, hola, and introduced myself, they're sort of like, oh, thank goodness for
This
that.
is not the one.
But yes, there are definitely some language differences, and there's some awkward laughs and awkward mistakes that were very innocent on my part, but made them laugh a fair bit.
I bet.
So
what are
lots
these?
of funny moments in your book.
I can imagine if they got anything like an English sense of humour, they would have been having you do some very funny things.
No, they just said things which in Spanish might have been really rude. And I thought, oh my god, how can they be saying that? And then me saying words in Spanish that they were saying, and that burst out laughing. And I thought, what's so funny? And they just said, that means this over here. And I thought, oh my god, I'm so sorry. So,
Because it's
Yeah.
Spanish and Spanish, isn't there?
Yeah.
Spanish.
they
Yes.
definitely speak their own type of Spanish, but now my mother says I speak Argentinian.
Oh, right.
And I went to Spain last summer to see family, and some people were from that I didn't know were saying, "Oh, so whereabouts in Argentina are you from?" I was like, I'm not. But I had spent 3 months speaking nothing but Spanish, which, despite having a Spanish parent, was something I'd never done before. I've always spoken both English and Spanish. That was the first time I'd ever spoken just Spanish,
Right.
solid for 3 months, to the point that I then struggled typing and writing English the few times I had to speak.
Gosh.
And that obviously just changed my language a bit, and I speak with this now Argentinian twang, and sometimes get told off for it. So Sophia, stop speaking Argentinian. So what? I'm not. I'm sorry. Don't even realise. And it gets worse when I speak to them, of course, because then I'm hearing them speak, and then over the phone, my mother's looking at me like, "What on earth? What?" She says, "It comes out of you. The more you speak to them, then you get this accent back."
Of course.
Oh, gosh.
Of course.
Of course
Yeah.
it does, yes.
Yeah.
So what did these gauchos have you do, Sophia? What were you doing on the ranch?
Well, at the beginning, it was very much like, look after you, and you can tag along with us, but don't worry, you don't need to do anything that you don't want to. They only ever gave me the nicest horses, something a bomb-proof horse. And the first couple of days was helping them with things like vaccinating, the castration of calves, with lassos and things like that. Just joining them on roundups where the cattle had already been moved, but just wandering around to make sure there were no cattle left behind. It's a very gentle sort of work, so I think they were probably just eyeing up my capabilities. And one of them seemed very relieved when I did sort of gallop away and chase a calf, and he just said to me, "Oh, you can ride." It's like, yes, that is why I'm here.
I did say that.
And well, over time, as my relationship grew with them, and I got to know them, they got to know me, I probably became a bit more stubborn and insisted on doing an awful lot more. They said, "We will not have you pushing cattle up in the pens, because that's really quite a dangerous job. The cattle can knock over the horses, you can be pushed off the horse, they can smash into your legs, like horrible things."
Right.
And I said, "Look, I'm not going to go mad, but I've got to do this." And it was just one
So
day.
you were doing this?
Yes. They were all focusing heavily down the line, getting the cattle through the rush, the race even, and the horse was just stood in amongst the cattle, just stood there quietly, nobody on it. Needed to push the cattle through, so I hopped on this horse and pushed it through, and then they just they got to a point that they said, like, "Sophia, you're so bloody stubborn, we're not even going to try and tell you not to anymore." And
what does that sound like in Argentina?
And that was it, really. Eventually, I said, like, "No, I'm going to do it," and they said, "For God's sake, well, okay, you know what? Fine, do it," because apparently we can't stop you. So that was nice, but they always kept an eye on me, and every time, if anything looked like it was going to get bad, then they'd interfere and say, "Just stop that." One occasion with one horse particularly misbehaving, and they could see that I wasn't particularly worried, but it looked like this thing was going to rear up and throw itself backwards, and they just said, like, get off. Please get off that horse now."
Right.
And I just said, "Yeah, that's fine, I will." I'll draw a line there.
Right.
Don't want a horse falling back onto me.
No.
But they're sort of like, "Oh, well, she's mad, let her get on with it, but we'll keep an eye on you regardless." Right. And yeah, I loved them for it. They were so
wonderful.
Sweet. Yeah.
So this was
amazing.
Really a life experience from the word go, wasn't it?
It was like a film or a book. So it was just everything about it was just magical. The landscape, the sunsets, the sunrises, the experiences, the people, just everything was just stunning.
There's some really interesting points you make in your book about how how different farming is over there from here. So would you like to say a bit about that?
Well, yeah, of course. So, well, first things first is in the UK, if you've got 200-acre beef farm, you might have about 100 cattle, whereas over there the ranch was 56,000 hectares, so just over 100,000 acres, which is twice the size of Birmingham in
That's an incredible mind picture. Twice the size of Birmingham.
A ranch twice the size of Birmingham with close to 9,000 cattle. And of course, in the UK, the law is you've got to check your cattle once a day.
That's the law.
The law is you've got to check your stock once a day. You can't do that out there, of course. So
No, of course not.
This ranch was split into lots, so like massive fields ranging from perhaps 300 hectares to 1,100 hectares, and you saw the cattle when you worked with them. You'd count them before you let them out of the pens, and you'd count when they come back in. A couple missing, they've probably fallen prey to something, or got sick. It's very much survival of the fittest out there. They are wild, and they were wild to work with in the pens. They're not handled the way that we handle them here.
No.
So they're dangerous cattle to work with, first of all. Some of them would turn on even the horses, and so completely different. And the nice thing out there was that it was all pasture, expansive, just massive. So it was nice to see that, because obviously we have this idea about South American beef and all this deforestation pumped full of soy and grain and things like that. But these, there's no forest in La Pampa, no rainforest was cut down to make it these vast plains. That's just the way it was. And the cattle lived off whatever grew there. And the calves would go to what deemed a feedlot at a separate ranch also owned by the family, but again they weren't pumped full of grain. I went to one of these feedlots and it was like maize and alfalfa silage and things like that, so not all this soy and corn and everything else that you hear about. So that was a very good thing to know, very nice to know, and it was nice to see how everything worked with the nature out there. They lived wild, and you just had to work with it. In a sense, it was harsher, almost a bit more cruel when you say, yeah, survival of the fittest, something will make it, something won't, but you need those hardy animals, because in the summer it's 40 degrees, it can reach 40 degrees, and in the winter it can get down to -14. So it's massive fluctuations. They don't get snow in that part of La Pampa, but it's, the sand will turn to ice, it's freezing cold, it gets really windy as well in the springtime. So the conditions are harsh, but the cattle adapt to live with it, and they're these great big fat shorter Angus cattle, grazing not a lot, and they had these great big tummies on them that you'd be on the horses herding them along, and these tummies would be swaying from one side to another. And then again, from like an agricultural point of view, it was very interesting, because you say there are cattle here in the UK that graze really good ground, and you can struggle to keep condition on them. It's like, well, how can we perhaps incorporate genetics or focus, be a bit almost harsher with our cattle to ensure that we can make them as efficient as the cattle out there? Yes. And the same same went for Australia.
You said earlier, I think, that you were interested to see how things are done differently in other parts of the world, and that is such, excuse me for saying this, but it's such an intelligent thing to do, and we don't understand why everybody in the world doesn't think like that. I mean, one subject that comes to mind is, of all subjects, the penal system in the UK. Totally different to the penal system in Scandinavia, for example. But we don't seem to be, and the penal system in Scandinavia produces better results. Less fat, but better results. But we don't seem in the UK to be able to learn from the Scandinavians, which is silly. But we need to be able to do that in all things. I mean, particularly with agriculture. You know, what are the Argentinians doing that we could be doing here to improve things? And of course, that's something that obviously keen and interested in.
Yeah, and Argentina was very good, but what was the real eye-opener, I must say, was the Outback cattle station in Australia, because that was 40,000 acres with 2,000 cattle, so much smaller, much less, but that was pure desert, and that was Outback, which was completely flat. No, none of these creeks and billabongs with gum trees. No, it was just flat and barren. Not a thing there. And I was there in the summer. It was just ground. There was no real grass. There were just occasional tussocks of straw. And what they did have was an invasion of the same acacias that grew in Argentina, but the Australian government wants to eradicate them as an invasive species. But it was thanks to the pods from those as a legume. They're high in protein and also quite high in sugar as well.
Right.
And the cattle actually do quite well out of it.
Right.
And whilst in Argentina they move the cattle in the winter to the really bushy areas so that they can eat that,
Right.
in Australia they're being obliged to get rid of them because they're invasive. But these cattle in Australia, they were different breed. They're called the Drought Master, which is a composite breed that was, as the name suggests, they're pretty good at tolerating the 45 degree,
Gosh,
for 5-6 months of the year.
Incredible.
And they're not as fat as what was in Argentina, but they were in good condition, shiny coats.
Right.
And you think, how? That was the first thing, was how? How are these cattle surviving? There is nothing to eat, but obviously the little bits that they do eat was
enough.
good enough.
Wow.
So of course
Wow.
by the time they would enter some sort of feedlot, they put the weight on and they're good to go.
Yes.
But on the station, if you needed beef, you took one of your own and sorted that out. And yes, it was lean, but it was good. It was a substantial beast, and you
Right.
thought that it's absolutely incredible.
So you ate well.
Yes. Argentinian beef certainly beats the Australian beef, I'm afraid to say, though.
Well,
you give some, there's certainly some mouth-watering descriptions in your book of Argentinian beef.
Yes.
And, I don't know how well vegetarians get on there, but
you'd struggle on the ranch, that's for sure.
Yes.
It was just
Absolutely.
meat and more meat.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
but you loved it.
It was, proper carnivore.
Well, speaking of food and meat, this was picked out of the book where you say the detachment between food and the consumer in this day and age is, I believe, one of the scariest issues modern producers face. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Well, sadly, we live in a society where people genuinely think that meat that's on a supermarket shelf hasn't come from a farm. And I'm not saying that as an exaggeration. There are people who genuinely say, why would you be buying your produce from a butcher that has killed an animal if you can get it from a supermarket? And it's mind-boggling.
Have people actually said that to you?
It's mind-boggling, not to me, but I've seen it in newspapers. Yes. And
this is a rumour, I think, being put out by Bill Gates, because he wants meat grown in the lab, doesn't he?
Yeah,
that's absolutely right. Yes.
But this was pre-Impossible Burger. This was a few years ago, and you thought this is a serious problem. And in the States, and again, this was a very true statistic, that in the States, 7% of the people that were surveyed thought that chocolate milk was from a brown cow. And you think there's something so wrong. This needs rectifying.
Right.
And again, here in the UK a few years ago, another survey where they targeted children, and they were asking them, what's in a fish finger? It's chicken. Where does pasta come from? It's from a tree. And you think, how is there any hope?
Well, education...
Sophia, serious issue of education.
Education
has come a long way, hasn't it, really?
Sad.
But clearly it's got a much further journey to make yet.
It needs to go a bit further,
Gracious me.
You just mentioned Bill Gates. Well, Pearson produced a lot of textbooks for school, and Pearson, I believe, has have Bill Gates as one of our owners. Perhaps there's connection. Moving
Perhaps
swiftly
there
on.
is. Now, interestingly, I don't know if you listen to him, but Neil Oliver, native, King of Scotland as some call him, does a very interesting podcast, several actually, each week, and one in particular that he made just a few weeks ago. He recounted a story of him going to Australia, and he was taken to a particular place with an Aborigine to fish for crocodiles. And he explains that he went out in the evening on a boat. The water was as black as coal, and by shining a torch you could see these amber lights, double lights in the water, which were of course the eyes of these crocodiles. Well, the story is that the Aborigine hunter put a spear into the back of the head of a crocodile, and a couple of guys hauled them onto the boat, and Neil Oliver says that the crocodile was about as big as the boat. A bit worrying. The point about this is that 10 minutes later, the whole crew and others too were eating this crocodile, and he said it makes you really think about the connection between life and death and us and animals, and how we sustain life for ourselves on planet Earth right now. Because it is dog eat dog. There comes a time when we have to. The makeup is that we have to eat animals. Maybe that'll change in the future, but we'll see. But he made a very strong point. I think you basically said the same thing in that sentence there.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was getting at, really. And it's a different attitude here, I guess. Meat is a commodity, and we import things from all over the world, which is not sustainable. But if you wanted to avoid meat, you could eat just about anything. But then thinking back to these people who, they live on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. They go out the weekends back to their villages. But especially during the lockdown, and Argentina was very strict during the COVID lockdown, where you could only go shopping on a day allocated to you. And you just suddenly thought, if you run out of food on a ranch, which is an hour and a half away from a town, plus you've got this lockdown, which is like you happen to not be able to be allowed to go to the shops on that day because your ID card says that you can't. Well, what do? And well, the answer is that you find an animal and you eat that. And what beyond that is then the gauchos would fight between amongst themselves to say, I need that leather because my tack is wearing out. I need new reins, my stirrups snapped the other day. I need the leather. Or, I want the antlers from that deer because I am making a lamp, or I need the handle for a new knife, or I'm making a nice wall mounting to hang my wine glasses up, and that wine glass would sit perfectly in between those. And it's completely different. Their attitude out there is they enjoy hunting, but they don't shoot for the fun of it, not for the sake of it.
No.
Whereas
it's for need.
The people who came to the ranch would shoot for the fun of it, and that's completely different. But at least it wasn't wasted, because all the rest of us ate and used everything that came from there.
Yes.
Yeah, and I thought, like I said, I also say in the book, whether you like it or not, it's a reality. And I just think you've got to understand that, poor animal, sure, but if it's used properly it's part in nature, essentially, then... Well,
the biggest crime of all, I think, is waste, isn't it? And to waste the life of a living creature, whether it's a human creature or it's an animal, what we would regard as an animal creature, it's wrong. It's wrong. Because our ancestors in this world, and those of Central America, South America, of course, those in Australia, all understand this without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
But we have lost sight of all of that, and the feeling a part of that, and we have to relearn it.
Yeah, we do. We need to reconnect with what's real, actually. And if it's not it's not that it's wrong to eat animals, it's just that it needs to be done in the right way with respect.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're all part of a chain. And actually work out when we live and we also die. It's just part of a life cycle. And I actually agree with you about the disconnection between life and death and nature. So, very different out there.
Yeah, and it's easy for people in the cities to say, we could be plant-based. Like, these are the facts and we could be. But I think those same people should go to these remote places where you don't get a vegetable. It was beef and potatoes. That's it. That's pretty much what I sustained myself on for 3 months. And they're all fit and healthy. I came back fit and healthy. Yeah. And, not even COVID spread through Argentina the same way it did here. So obviously they got something in them that's healthier. Yeah. And,
So, tell us, when you came back, was it then that you thought, actually, I'm going to write about this experience?
Absolutely, yes. So I had this grand idea that when I would get back from my travels, I would be sat in the sun at the pub with my friends and my family, telling them everything. I wanted to connect up my computer to the television, show everybody all my photos, tell all the stories. And of course came back in the midst of the lockdown in May 2020, and I spent 2 weeks up in my bedroom, completely isolated from my parents. I'd not seen them for 9 months, and suddenly I was just completely alone. I'd been surrounded by people on the ranch, living very normally because La Pampa was free of COVID for months. And just nobody left or entered the ranch, so we were carrying on as normal, and it was a great big shock to suddenly be sat alone all day, every day for 2 weeks. And I thought, I've got so much to tell, and I'm not going to do that over a phone call. I can't do that. So I thought, well, I'll jot some things down. This might be worth putting down, perhaps just for me or whatever. Yeah. And bit by bit, it grew and grew, and any day off I had from work, that is what I dedicated my time to. And I surprised myself that it's actually come to be in the end.
So a bit of note writing, just for your personal use, turned into, the best part of 200,000 words?
Yeah, 200,000 words. Over 300 pages of book. I'm very happy because it's nice to hear, and I'm hoping that they're very, very honest. I want people to be honest, but so far when people say that sounded incredible and that was a jolly good read, and I say, well, thank you, and that's exactly what I want. Not even if you don't particularly enjoy it, that's a shame, but just take something away from it. Take something with you.
Myself, I haven't read the book, but Helen has shared extensive bits of the book with me, and from that I know, and I'm sure Helen agrees, that this is a truly excellent read, and for someone who wants to get out of themselves to know something else about the world, Patagonia in this case, and some Argentinian speaking gauchos, this is the place to go to get that experience.
Oh, thank you very much.
Definitely, yes. There's so much in there in different ways. For somebody who wants to know the detail about farming, every painful detail, and you included some of those, which is really great. And I know you agonised over one, but it was important. I think personally, you made the right decision to include the situation in which an animal was put out of his misery, frankly, which was exactly the right thing to do.
Thank you. I did that. That was one of the very last things I put into the entire book, because I was thinking, I don't know if I should put it in or not, but I decided to, so it's really good. It's nice to hear that. Thank you.
I love what you said earlier when you said you knew you had everything in the book. Would you like to tell us what you...
Yes, so it was 2 years in the writing,
right,
from May 2020 to May 2022,
right.
And I knew I had everything in the book when I stopped waking up at night. So I'd say waking up at night or just any other part during the day.
Right.
If something came into my mind, I'd quickly jot it down just to remind myself to include in the book. It could have been a a sudden rephrasing of something, or the tiniest little detail, tiny scenario, or just say, actually, that's worth talking about. And yes, I had a notebook next to my bed for the whole 2 years, and would wake up at night and say, I need to put that in. And when I finally started sleeping through the night, I said, right, the book is done.
Yes.
Nothing more to put in.
Perfect.
That's excellent. Very organised. Yeah.
And the mark of a true writer, when they have a notebook by the side of their bed.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, this is a masterpiece of work, clearly. And is it going to be the last, I wonder? I shouldn't think so.
Oh, I don't know. I get asked this a lot. I'm sure if I ever got back out there, then there'd be plenty more to write about. But yeah, we'll see. I don't know. That could be a book on the English agriculture, British style. I don't know yet.
Who knows?
I've only just got this one out the way. So
well, whenever, if ever
take
that
a breather.
happens, you must come back and talk to us about that, because I'm
Oh,
sure
of
that's going
course.
to be a cracking read
I
too.
would do, for sure. Thank
But
you.
either way, I mean, we've talked obviously about talking with you again about your interest in rare breeds and the Wagyu beef, etc. So
Yeah.
there's subjects that we need to come back to there,
Mhm.
and more besides, I know. But in the meantime, how can people get a copy of your book?
Well, if you're in and around Tetbury or Nailsworth, then you can get it from the Yellow Lighted bookshop, and I would encourage people to do so, because I wanted to help, well,
Yes.
do a little bit to help the local area as well.
Yeah.
But if you're listening from perhaps further afield, or you want the Kindle version, then you can get hold of it on Amazon. And obviously it's just starting up, so I do say, if you can, please leave a review. I'd be incredibly grateful to get the ratings up, and an honest review, of course. And yeah, so Amazon for Kindle and copies, and yeah, the Yellow Lighted bookshop if you're
That's wonderful.
nearby.
Can I say, actually, for the benefit of our listeners, that Sophia, you're a member of My Writing Shed. It's a Facebook group, of course.
Yeah.
And with your experience and knowledge now, having gone through the process, agonising over the order of words in a sentence and putting them together in a paragraph,
Yes.
and not least 200,000 words of a novel, you've got a bit to share with other people that might be on a similar journey. Is that right?
Yes.
So maybe those people out there that are thinking about writing a book, or even doing it now, struggling with it, they might like to join My Writing Shed on Facebook and perhaps interact with you, Sophia, so you can give them a few pointers. How about that?
I would be delighted to help out, because I wouldn't have managed to publish it if I hadn't got help from other sources too. So actually 2 local writers and somebody else from far away who I only met once, but her travel book was by me the whole time, just to give me a sense and idea as well. So yes, I would be very happy to help out.
How about that?
Just give any
wonderful.
advice, because it's certainly a bit different when you do the self-publish rather than publish. You've got a lot more work to do. It was worth it though, I think.
I can tell. Wonderful. Well, look, we know how to get hold of the book, and what we will do, as is usual, we'll put the details of how to access the book and other things too in the show notes, so people can access those details whenever they would like to. But Sophia, can we extend our very warm gratitude to you, your thanks for joining us today in what has been a most fascinating talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you
It
so
most
much for
certainly
having
has.
me. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so
Wonderful.
much.
Thank you.
Sophia. We have been talking with another successful published author. For many of you with an ambition to write a book, that might be exactly where your ambition stays, as an ambition. In the end, it matters little whether writing a book takes you 10 weeks, 10 months, or even 10 years. What matters is that you write it. It certainly matters to you, and it could matter to an untold number of others, your readers. If you have an interest in writing, there's one point you need to have a firm grip on. Writers write. Writers can write, in principle, about anything. They will have their own particular interests, but first and foremost, writers are communicators. They use their skills with a written word to communicate their message to others. There are the J.K. Rowling types in this world, prolific word machines with an imagination to support it, and there are those who struggle to get almost anything on paper. The interesting fact, though, is this. If you are one of those struggling to get it down, then it clearly means there is a writer in you and they're fighting to get out. Stick with it. there's a very good reason. If you have that interest in writing, if maybe you could do with some guidance in how to start, or finish even, have a look at My Writing Shed on Facebook. This is a group of writers, some published like the one we've just been talking with, and some just starting to write. There are some who are a bit stuck for one reason or another, and others needing pointers in how and where to find that all-important path to being published. One final quick message. Look out for an exciting invitation to become a co-writer in a new book. The invitation to everyone who can write. The subject will be disclosed here on Connect and on My Writing Shed. It is, though, a subject everyone will have something to say about. Intrigued? We do hope so. Remember, writers write. Join My Writing Shed and become a writer.